Hello and welcome back to Something Z, and welcome to a Deku out of Shadow Teleportation Quirk Part 6. Last time on the What If, Ida, Todoroki, and Izuku were able to survive and beat the hero killer, so let's jump into the What If. They spent a couple of days in the hospital, and when they got out of the hospital, Manuel got a suspension on his license, and since Headshot was in the top 10 heroes in Japan, he was able to get away with it without any consequences. And Izuku and Headshot spent around 1.5 days training hand-to-hand combat and dodging. So we skip a week after written exams, in which everyone gets the same score as they do in the original canon, in both the practice and the actual exam, and all the teams will be the exact same, and all of the other teams besides Bako and Izuku will end in the same way. And when the exams begin, Izuku and Bako's plan was to fight All Might head on. So they begin with Izuku making a portal and launching themselves at All Might. And when they are face to face with All Might, Bako and Izuku launch attacks, with Bako firing an explosion, and Izuku using a portal to punch All Might in the gut. But both attacks didn't seem to have that much of an effect on the number 1 hero. Then the pro hero launched the smash attack and launched the two away, and they almost got knocked into a building. But Izuku created a portal and made it so they launched back at All Might. And while Izuku and Bako were flying back at All Might, Izuku created a portal in front of both of Bako's hands, and he put them on both sides of All Might. And before he could move out of the way, Bako launched explosions and quickly pulled his hands out of the portals. All Might, knowing it's going to be harder because of Izuku's quirk, he charged at Izuku, and when he was face to face with Izuku, he launched a barrage of punches, and Izuku tried to block the attacks by putting mini portals where the punches would hit him, and he located them on All Might's sides, making All Might punch himself. But he wasn't able to block all the attacks, and when he got punched once, launched him at the wall of a building, leaving Bako to have to fight All Might on his own for a short time, until Izuku can get back up. And after a bit of fighting, Bako got held down by All Might with one hand, and when Izuku got close enough, he created a portal under Bako and where Izuku was. And before All Might can go through the portal, Izuku closed it, and the two went as fast as they could to a nearby alleyway, and Izuku created a portal above and below them, and they launched themselves from alleyway to alleyway until far away, and they landed on top of a building. With around 10 minutes left, they had to admit that they couldn't beat All Might, and that they had to go to the exit if they wanted to pass. So they came up with a plan, and there's now 8 minutes left. And when they finished coming up with the plan, All Might found them, and he jumped onto the building that the two were on, and he launched them with one punch back to the original pathway. And Izuku takes Bako into an alleyway, and he puts a portal over and under them, and he launches them as far as he can. And with 5 minutes left, they are 30 feet away from the gate. And All Might does a New Hampshire smash and launches himself at the two. And Izuku, with just enough energy, he creates a portal at the wall, and one right next to him. So All Might gets thrown in the other direction. And when the two land, Bako picks up Izuku by the arm, and he is able to get to the gate, with just enough time left. So we jump to when everyone is in class waiting for the results when Aizawa comes into the classroom. And he says that even if you fail the exams, you will still come to the field trip. And after class 1A decided that they wanted to go shopping together. And after a bit of time, they separated, leaving Izuku alone. And when he went to sit down on a nearby bench, someone sat right next to him. And he couldn't tell who he was since he had a hoodie, and Izuku did not recognize his face. And the hooded man put his arm around him. "Oh, it's so nice to see you again." When the guy said again, Izuku finally figured out who he was. It was the villain who attacked them at the USJ. Izuku was about to create a portal, but before he could, he heard, "I know what you're thinking. It's, oh, I can make a portal out of it, right? Well, I have my teleporter here as well. So make a portal, and I'll kill as many people as possible, so it will be all your fault. So why don't we talk?" And just to be clear, Kurogiri was not actually there, but Izuku fell for it, and he instantly stops trying to make a portal, and just sits and listens. And Shigaraki asks Izuku what makes Stan and him different, and he gets the same answers as he does in the canon. And when he figures it out, Ochako came back, and when Shigaraki saw her, he let his arm go, and he walked into the crowd of people, and the police weren't able to find him. And after the police shut down the mall, Izuku got questioned by the police to find anything out on the League of Villains. So he skipped to when Class 1A is at the cliff in the woods, and there they meet the WWPC, and they are thrown off the cliff by Pixie Bob using her quirk, and they are told to get to the camp as quick as they can, and they are allowed to use their quirks. Hours later, they are finally able to get to the camp, and everyone was beaten up, dirty, and exhausted from using their quirks too much, and Izuku is almost at the point of collapsing because of how much he had to use his quirk. So all those things happen where Izuku learns about Ko's parents. So we skip to the next day, and the way Izuku's training is by standing next to Bako, Todoroki, Momo, and Sato. And there he creates 2 portals as big as he can, which is around 15 feet big, and he falls. And he has to keep the portals open as long as he can. Whenever he gets too tired, Momo throws some energy boosters that he carries with him in his hero costume. But after 10 hours of doing that, they eventually couldn't sustain him anymore, and he began to pass out, in which Todoroki had to make an ice ramp to make it so he didn't die from falling. And he's woken up when it's time for the class to make dinner. And after they make dinner, Izuku notices that Koda isn't there. So he used some of the energy he got back to see where Koda was, and he had food on a plate in his arms, so he launched himself slow enough to keep the food there. And he eventually finds Koda on a cliff, and Koda talks about how he hates heroes. And after he's done talking, Izuku drops a plate of food and leaves Koda on the cliff. So we skip to the next night after another day's worth of training. Instead of doing it in lighted areas, he had to do it in the same cave as Tokoyami. And there he learns about Dark Shadow and how it's dangerous when it's very dark. He even had to dodge Dark Shadow's attacks from time to time, until Tokoyami was able to get control again, and they were told that they were going to do a test of courage. And before Izuku went in by himself, they all noticed that the forest was on fire with blue flames, and then they started to be attacked by villains. And before Izuku could do anything, he remembered that Koda is probably where he was last night. So he created a portal and launched himself through the forest until he gets to the cliff. And while this was going on, Koda was already face to face with the villain, Muscular, and he realizes that Muscular is actually the guy that killed his parents. And before Muscular was able to punch Koda, there was a portal that appeared in front of his fist and his gun, making him punch himself. When Muscular looks around to see what happens, he sees Izuku launching himself at the cliff next to Koda. And seeing Izuku, he can recognize that he was actually on Shigaraki's list. And when Izuku lands, he swallows some of the energy boosters that he had left in his pockets, and he swears he will protect Koda. And Muscular charges towards Izuku, and he asks if he knows where Bako is. And before Izuku was able to realize what was going on, he gets hit in the gut by Muscular, and he would have been pounded into the cliff, but he creates a portal and launches himself at Muscular. And before he gets punched again, he creates a portal and makes the villain punch himself again. The villain's starting to get annoyed by this kid's quirk, keeps punching, and instead he keeps punching himself instead. And then he eventually thinks of something and charges at Koda, which is a distraction. And before Izuku can create a portal to defend himself, Muscular was able to get on top of Izuku and started to crush him. And before Izuku gets fully crushed, he was able to create a portal under the two and on the side of the mountain, launching the two into the forest. And before Muscular can reach Izuku, he created a portal back onto the mountain to make sure Koda is okay. And since this all happened differently, it isn't as impactful as it is in the canon, but it still makes Koda think about how he was acting before. And since Izuku just launched Muscular away, he's just somewhere else and he's still in action. And Izuku after a bit carries Koda on his back, and he launches the two of them into the forest, until they see Aizawa, who sees Izuku dirty and covered in scratches and blood from the fight he was just in. And Izuku gives Koda to Aizawa, and Izuku is told to tell something to Mandalay. When he gets back to where the pro hero was, she sent out a message saying Aizawa has allowed them permission to fight, and that the villains are after Bakugo. And Magnus, seeing Izuku, goes after him, but before he could land the blow, Izuku made a portal making them hit themselves instead, and making them back up. And Izuku creates a portal and launches himself through the woods, avoiding the smoke, and he eventually finds Shoji being chased by Dark Shadow. And Izuku grabs Shoji, and he launched them both, and while they were being launched, they were looking for Bako, and Dark Shadow was right behind them. And when they see Bako and Todoroki, they were in the middle of a fight, fighting Moonfish, and they launched themselves right above Moonfish, making Dark Shadow swat Moonfish away, and with one hit he was knocked out. Todoroki and Bako used their quirks to make Dark Shadow calm down and make him controllable again. And after that, they decide to stay in a group and walk back to camp, and eventually they see Ochako getting her blood drained and Sue stuck to a tree. And when the person sucking Ochako's blood sees them, she runs away, and since Izuku isn't as badly damaged, Toga doesn't get a crush on him. Ochako, after Izuku tells them that they are leading Bako back to camp, tells them that Bako isn't behind them, and when they turn their heads, she was right. They hear someone speak, and when they look to see where the sound came from, they see someone with blue marbles in his hand, and he says he took them, in which Todoroki and Izuku tried to attack him, but he was able to dodge the attack, and he ran too fast for them to catch him, and they come up with a similar plan as they do in the canon. And the plan was to use Ochako to make them float and Sue through them, but this time, to make them go faster, Izuku created portals and got to them quicker, and they landed about 20 feet from where they do originally, but they still land in the clearing. and the people that were there were the same as in the canon, but there was one more person than before. It was Muscular, who came to the rendezvous point after he got launched and was able to find Izuku. Compress then turns into a marble to get the people off of him, and Dabi launches a wave of flames, in which Izuku redirected at Muscular, which burns him slightly. And when Mr. Compress turns back to normal, he shows 2 marbles in his mouth, in which a naval laser comes out of nowhere and breaks mask, and the 2 marbles get launched out of his mouth, and Izuku tried to grab one of the marbles, which contained Tokoyami. But while Izuku was distracted, Mr. Compress used his quirk on Izuku, and he grabbed his marble, capturing him. And as in the canon, they still have Bako, so the villains with Izuku and Bako leave the camp. And that's when we'll leave the What If. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time on Something Z.